Hey guys, Griffin Caroline here for PC Games N, and in this video we're bringing you the top 10 realistic military shooters you can experience on PC right now. And this is my forte. I do love an immersive tactical shooter, don't I, Caroline?
You certainly do, Griff. Well, apart from when you die and get all annoyed. That happens quite a lot. But anyway, before we begin, please give the channel a quick subscribe for more videos like this one and ring that bell to get alerts for all of our videos as soon as they're out.
Yes, that would be as amazing as a flawless breach and clear. And now that's all out of the way, let's get started. Here's the top 10 best realistic military shooters on PC.
Insurgency Sandstorm is an ultra-realistic FPS, all about unscripted urban street fights. It gives you access to loads of authentic weapons right from the off, so you can mix and match all your magnified optics, tracer rounds, foregrips, bipods, laser sights and extended mags to your heart's content without needing to unlock them. Just be aware that the more you carry, the slower you'll run. We're talking about realism after all. You can choose a class, but Insurgency's roles are a little different to those in most shooters. For example, the Commander class can use binoculars to designate where artillery strikes should be fired, but those big guns can only be called in should there be an Observer class player nearby. You can make the call using their radio. So much of Insurgency is about working together, and this class pairing proves how vital good team play is. Callouts are key in the 8-player co-op mode, such as saying things like "on your left" and "oh crap, I've been blown up," you know, stuff like that. But if you're too loud, the enemy will actually hear you and probably attempt to flank, thanks to the game's proximity voice chat. Just like in real life, you need to work together and keep the chatter to an efficient minimum.
Stress, panic and terror are what any simulation of war should induce in you, and that's exactly what Verdun delivers. It is sheer unbridled tension. Set across World War I's Western Front, the game immerses you in the merciless trench battles that characterise the Great War. The atmosphere is meticulously researched, with everything from the detail of the men's uniforms to the painstakingly recreated terrain. Perfecting the era's weaponry is obviously important too, and Verdun gives you authentic firearms with accurate bullet physics and absolutely no floating crosshairs. There are also ferocious artillery barrages and nightmarish poison gas attacks that will have you scrambling to strap on a gas mask. But it's the epic 64-player battles with added AI bots that make Verdun a true World War I sim. Dynamic frontlines move and shift depending on how your team's doing, letting you use momentum to stave off attacks and launch your own counter-attacks in a mad dash across no man's land. Such an attack is stressful, incredibly gory, and definitely not for the faint of heart. If you're looking for a realistic historical war game, Verdun is as close to the period as you'll ever want to get.
Few shooters give you a better idea of what it's like to actually fire a gun than the game Receiver. Each part of your pistol is operated independently, to the point where each step in the process of loading your weapon is a fiddly, bespoke action. There's a key press for removing the magazine, one for adding ammo, another for loading the mag, releasing the slide, cocking it, and so on. Switch to your Magnum and you'll find a completely different reload scheme you have to learn, due to it being a revolver rather than a pistol. Receiver doesn't just pay attention to the intricacies of gunplay, but walkplay too. If walkplay is even a thing, which it is now, I've decided. Here, you don't just hold W to run, you must instead repeatedly tap W to take individual steps. It's like QWOP, but with guns. You really have to become trigger literate to stand a chance in Receiver, but thankfully the enemies are pretty simple to take down. As you roam around the procedurally generated high-rise, you won't find humans. Instead, you fight hovering taser robots and machine gun turrets. Alright, your enemies aren't that realistic, but the detailed handgun simulation really impresses.
Developer The Farm 51 created its combined arms shooter World War III with help from actual military professionals. The game includes genuine national armed forces fighting in real locations, including Warsaw, Berlin and Moscow. So it's meant to be a look at how World War III were to actually go down if it were to ever happen. Let's hope not, eh? Still, if an enemy army does start parachuting into your local high street, you at least have a game that will show you how to deal with all that. According to the Farm 51, World War III has the most authentic bullet versus armor system in the FPS genre to date, which is quite some claim. It's a hard thing to prove since we don't exactly have a stockpile of guns and armor to test, but what's immediately noticeable is how lethal bullets are in the game. You die extremely quickly, and each weapon feels sturdy upon being fired. That's partly due to the weight system. Oh yes, you don't just play a floating camera here, you're a fully realised person with weight and momentum to consider. Besides that, World War III is characterised by large-scale infantry skirmishes in urban environments where you need to use teamwork and cooperation to navigate actual war zones. There are vehicles to drive, remote drones to steer, and plenty of destruction to cause.
Squad from developer Offworld Industries isn't quite finished, but you can still give it a go right now thanks to Steam Early Access. Fans have likened Squad to a blend of Arma 3 and Battlefield. It's a large-scale online military shooter with 50 versus 50 matches where coordination and squad cohesion really matter. Communication is so important here that there's actually a chain of command you'll need to consider during battles. Orders need to be passed up through that chain via comms to ensure they get to the relevant authority. As you can imagine, that causes the game to move at a slower pace than other military shooters, it being more along the lines of an actual drawn-out engagement. What this means is you've got time to build bases and fortify your position with sandbags, razor wire, roadblocks and HESCO walls. There are a few games with Squad's dedication to large-scale skirmishes, emphasis on logistics and communication, and base building, so if you're in it for the long game, Squad is one of the first hardcore tactical shooters you should really check out.
Next up, America's Army, a game made by the actual US Armed Forces, which means if you're in America, your tax dollars actually help pay for it. So consider yourself an investor, I guess. Small unit tactical maneuvers occupy the bulk of America's Army, so you're not fighting any major battles here. Instead, you take on the role of infantrymen practicing combat maneuvers at a military base. The aim of your team is something the military likes to call full spectrum, which means you're capable of fighting across a range of environments. You just have to prove it, and that means plenty of practice. Get ready to repeatedly run through small 6v6 indoor maps and larger 12v12 outdoor maps as you try to perfect even the smallest of combat actions. Yes, this game is so hardcore, it's one of the few military shooters that actively trains you to be a soldier. It is a recruitment tool after all. You should be fine as long as you stick to the army rules, like don't throw flashbangs at teammates or you'll be put in army jail. Man, there's so much you have to learn in the army, isn't there?
With Battlefield and COD taking us on rollercoaster World War II rides recently, it's easy to forget how hardcore and restrained World War II used to be in games. 2011's Red Orchestra 2 is definitely one of the more tense and cautious takes on the conflict. It focuses on the Battle of Stalingrad and the surrounding operations, letting you play as the German army as it launches its assault, as well as the Soviet army as it attempts to hold the city. By today's blockbuster standards, it does look a bit dull, but it's all about how it feels when you've got your headphones on and you're immersed in a match with 64 players. This is a game not so much about sprinting across the battlefield as explosions go off all around you, but slowly creeping through the abandoned buildings as you listen out for footsteps or bayoneting some dude in an alley. Quite a few servers run a realism mode, which takes out friendly names, kill confirmations and the radar, adding to that hardcore appeal. Much of developer Tripwire's efforts have been placed on realism. There's an effect where, if you're taking suppressing fire, colour drains from the screen and your aim becomes erratic in an attempt to mirror what it would be like to actually be shot at. Even the tanks are meticulously recreated. Hop in one and you'll find authentic, fully modelled 3D interiors. It may be nearly a decade old now, and obviously the community is not as active as it was, but Red Orchestra 2 needs a nod for being an extremely demanding take on World War II.
Next up, Sniper Elite 4. On the face of it, Rebellion's World War II sniper game doesn't look all that realistic, as you're basically a one-man army, but that's if you play on easy. Play on authentic and you'll have to act like an actual trained marksman to land your shots. Numerous real-world elements demand extra precision from every shot you make. So, for example, you'll need to account for the direction the wind is blowing because it will cause your bullet to veer off course. There's also gravity to consider as it affects the drop of your bullet. Scope drifting is another issue you have to contend with as no one holds their rifle perfectly still all the time. These elements all count towards the impression of making you think and feel like a hardened sniper. But there's something else the Sniper Elite 4 is famous for, and that's gore. While the game's extra kill cam is hardly realistic, World War II snipers didn't have Superman's vision as far as we know, it does act as a harrowing reminder of the grisly toll a real bullet takes on the human body. You get to see the inside of a man's head as a bullet bounces around inside like a pinball, taking out eyeballs, teeth and cheekbones. The rest of the body and organs are rendered in meticulous internal detail too. Word of advice, never get shot in the face, or, anywhere.
For many people, Arma 3 has been the PC's premier military game since 2013. One of the reasons it's so darn realistic is the setting. The Mediterranean islands of Altus and Stratus stretch over a massive 290 square kilometres. These maps have dense forests to take cover in, dusty plains to drive tanks over, and a fair share of wildlife, including snakes, sharks, and sea turtles. They also offer a huge variety of mission types, from diving exercises with underwater combat to dogfights in jets to volumetric clouds. And of course there's the combat you do when your feet are on solid ground. Arma 3 is really war on all fronts. To give you a quick idea of just how hardcore its simulation is, there are 15 different stances. It's not just crouched or prone. You can lie on your side, your back, or your stomach, whatever it takes to get a slightly better angle to target the enemy. This is a game that takes tactical positioning very seriously. If the 3 single-player campaigns or array of multiplayer scenarios aren't enough, fans have made loads of content available on the Steam Workshop, and a lot of it's even more hardcore than the main game. The community has made everything, from realistic Afghanistan and Bosnia maps to a new system for rappelling that enhances the rope physics and takes into account wind resistance and helicopter rotor speed. Or, if you're looking to soften that realistic edge a little, you could download a zombie mod. Everyone needs a break from 100% realism, right?
Full Spectrum Warrior is the oldest game on this list, having come out in 2004, but it's still an incredibly realistic shooter thanks to the fact it was originally meant to be a training aid for the US Army. If you want a realistic portrayal of infantry level urban warfare, this is it. You control 2 fire teams, moving them around the fictional Middle East city of Zekistan in a bid to suppress and outflank opponents. It's almost as much of a real-time strategy game as it is a shooter, forcing you to think several moves ahead if you want to survive. It's incredibly satisfying to take out enemies using the least amount of ammo as possible, while minimising civilian casualties at all times. Heroic charges won't win the day here, being smart and careful will. While it may be 15 years old and a bit clunky by modern standards, the foundation of how armies tackle urban encounters hasn't changed. As such, you'll get a full representation of close quarters engagements in Full Spectrum Warrior.
Now obviously these are far from the only hardcore military shooters on PC. Honourable mentions go out to the likes of Rainbow Six Siege for its believable breaching and clearing, Day of Infamy for a true-to-life depiction of World War II that focuses on team play, and Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway for its focus on actual World War II suppressing and flanking tactics.
Yeah, absolutely, all great games even if they didn't make our list, but there we go, 10 of the most eye-searingly realistic and